There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
What is art without the muse? Many of Western art's most famous works are depictions of women. But who were these women? Do they have their own stories to share with the world? Hello and welcome to ArtMuse, a podcast that aims to reshape the ways in which we interpret well-known works of art by paying dues to the women whose images have been immortalized, but whose names and stories have been wrongfully overlooked. While these women's faces are familiar to viewers around the world, their identities have been largely forgotten. Together, we will explore the important lives and legacy of the female muse and appreciate these works of art from a new perspective, through the eyes of the women whose image stares back at us. Is the muse in actuality just as, if not more, important than the artists themselves? And I'm your host, Grace Anna.
Welcome to part 2 of ArtMuse's 2-part episode on the revolutionary actress Charlotte Cushman. In part 1, we explored Charlotte's childhood, her father's abandonment, the family's subsequent descent into poverty, and Charlotte's early ambitions to become a singer. We then explored Charlotte's breakout performance as Lady Macbeth, her subsequent success in New York City, Albany, and Philadelphia, and her decision to move to London to further her career. We left things off in our story just after Charlotte set sail for England, leaving behind her family and the love of her life, Rose Sully, in hopes of finding success in the theater capital of the world. Charlotte arrived in Liverpool in November of 1844. Though the journey had been cumbersome, she was excited to be on foreign land and had high hopes for her future. She soon after moved to London, where she settled in the city's theater district, Covent Garden. Charlotte almost immediately began to look for work. After a few months, she was eventually offered a position at the Princess Theatre. It was here that Charlotte debuted in London, performing as Lady Macbeth alongside the famed American actor Edwin Forrest. Fortunately, English audiences were just as impressed with Charlotte's Lady Macbeth as American audiences had been, and she quickly became the talk of the town. A critic for the London Review even declared that she was the best Lady Macbeth that they had ever seen. Charlotte was thrilled to be so well received overseas. As she proudly wrote in a letter to her mother, "The press's reaction is far beyond my most sanguine expectations, and in my most ambitious moments, I never dreamed of the success that awaited me. I have done more than any American has done in London. I truly have. No American has ever succeeded as I have." But all the success in the world could not cure Charlotte's aching heart. She missed her dear Rose terribly and longed to be reunited. As she wrote in her journal, "I imagine Rose in her painting room. I hear her sigh for her absent friend, and spirits fall. I almost feel her arms around me. I wonder what I should do without her. I would not care or wish to have another home, deprived of her or her affection. I truly believe if I had her in my arms at this moment, I could press the breath out of her body." Charlotte began to worry that as time went on, Rose might forget about her, or worse, find someone to replace Charlotte with. And her fears were only exasperated when Rose suddenly stopped writing to her. Despite Charlotte's repeated pleas for a reply, she received only stone-cold silence in return. Until one day, Charlotte received a response from Rose. Much to Charlotte's horror, Rose shared that her father had found out about their relationship and had subsequently prohibited Rose from contacting Charlotte any further. Rose made it clear that this letter would be her last. Charlotte was absolutely devastated. She adored Rose with all her heart, and could not believe that Rose would give up on their love so easily. To make matters worse, Charlotte's mother also caught word of their relationship and scolded Charlotte for humiliating their family name. Charlotte had never felt so isolated and alone. It was the first time that Charlotte had come face to face with the homophobia of her time, and it shattered her entire spirit. Charlotte would never speak to or see Rose Sully again. In the aftermath of their breakup, Charlotte fell into a deep depression, not only mourning her relationship with Rose, but also the future she imagined they would share. And her heartbreak only exasperated her homesickness. She longed for the comfort of her family and friends, and felt incredibly lonesome on foreign land. As Charlotte confided in a letter, "I feel so sick for home, I hardly know what to do." Charlotte tried her best to distract herself with work, continuing to perform to sold-out audiences at the Princess Theater. And soon her broken heart would be healed by the greatest love story of all time, Romeo and Juliet. It was around this time that Charlotte was offered the part of Romeo in an upcoming production of Shakespeare's famous love tragedy. Charlotte was confident that she could play a convincing man on stage, having already had success as Hamlet in America. And she had a brilliant idea for who her Juliet could be, her younger sister, Susan. Susan was in the throes of a difficult situation. She had recently been duped into marrying a man 50 years her elder, who then abandoned her as soon as she became pregnant with their child. Now with a young son to support, Charlotte suggested that Susan take up acting to make a living. Having her sister by her side would also make Charlotte feel a little less alone. Charlotte quickly began to put her plan into action. She convinced Susan to come to London immediately and asked the manager of the Princess Theatre to take a chance on her sister, despite Susan's lack of experience. It certainly helped that Susan looked the part, younger and more feminine than Charlotte, with long chestnut hair and a slender frame. Susan would make a delicate and sensual Juliet. Charlotte and Susan officially premiered as Romeo and Juliet on December 29, 1846. Though Susan exceeded expectations, it was Charlotte as Romeo who stole the show. As she swaggered on the stage with her sword at her side, Charlotte shocked the audience with her realistic depiction. As one critic wrote, "Her personal appearance, voice, and manner are singularly adapted to juvenile male characters, and an observer would have difficulty realizing that Romeo was played by a girl." And as another critic attested, "Singularly masculine in her energy and her decisive action, this lady might pass for a youthful actor, with little chance of her sex being detected." In fact, some even went as far as to declare that Charlotte played a better Romeo than most men. As author Tana Wojcik wrote, "Charlotte had swagger, or what the Italians call sprezzatura, a kind of studied nonchalance. As Romeo, she walked like a man, spoke like a man, moved her body with the confidence of someone used to taking up space. The most manly thing about her was her sense of freedom. In fact, some argued she was a better man than most men." And Charlotte certainly had the support of female theatergoers, who became so enamored with her performance as Romeo that they developed crushes on her. As one female admirer put it, "Charlotte Cushman is a very dangerous young man." So it comes with no surprise that Romeo and Juliet was a sensational hit with the public. In fact, tickets were in such demand that the theater decided to run the production for 20 consecutive nights, selling out every performance. As the Illustrated London News reported, "The rush to see Miss Cushman as Romeo continues, and when this actress performs, every corner is occupied." And in the audience were some of London's greatest playwrights, actors, and critics, who all clamored to get a chance to see Charlotte on stage. As the famed playwright James Sheridan Knowles declared, "There is no trick to Miss Cushman's performance. No thought, no interest, no feeling seems to actuate her, except what might be looked for in Romeo himself. It was a performance of topmost passion. I listened and gazed and held my breath, while my blood ran hot and cold. My heart and mind are so full of this extraordinary, most extraordinary performance. With her increasing fame, Charlotte gained access to London's elite intellectual circles. It was around this time that Charlotte was taken in by Samuel and Anastasia Lawrence, a young couple known for their weekly salon that catered to artistic and bohemian circles. It was through their salon that Charlotte was introduced to many early feminists, including the writer Mary Howitt, a pioneer in women's rights. Howitt admired Charlotte's gender-bending performances and saw her as the embodiment of the new empowered woman. She introduced Charlotte to other feminist writers and even featured Charlotte in a feminist journal. Charlotte immediately felt at home among such forward-thinking and emboldened women, and was thrilled to be in the company of like-minded creatives. It was also through the salon that Charlotte made the acquaintance of the young poet Eliza Cook. Like Charlotte, Eliza was not afraid to break convention, preferring to dress in men's suits and hats. Eliza had recently seen Charlotte's performance as Romeo and had become wholly infatuated with her. So when Eliza spotted Charlotte at the salon, she knew she needed to make an unforgettable first impression. As author Tana Wojcik described, one evening at the Lawrences, Charlotte was deep in conversation when she saw a woman in her 20s striding through the crowd in a man's shirt, a skirt, and a wooden cloak. The woman rather sauntered than walked over to the fire, where she pulled up a chair and put her feet on the fender. Leaning back precariously, she shouted for a beer. Charlotte, catching her gaze, found herself staring into the girl's large blue eyes. Introducing themselves, Charlotte struck up a conversation, and Eliza revealed that she had already seen Charlotte as Romeo and been so starstruck she wrote a poem about her. Not since Rose Sully had Charlotte felt this strongly about a woman. They began to go everywhere together, and Eliza was so energized by Charlotte's company, she wrote more and faster than ever before. Charlotte and Eliza went on to share a 2-year romantic relationship, supporting and encouraging their respective creative practices. In fact, Eliza even dedicated an entire volume of poems to Charlotte. But unfortunately, their relationship eventually became strained. Both strong personalities, they became competitive over who was gaining more attention from the press. There was also the issue of Charlotte's wandering eye. Playing Romeo certainly earned Charlotte a reputation as a ladies' woman, and she was far from faithful to Eliza. Though they would always remain amicable, Charlotte and Eliza ultimately decided to split ways in 1848. They would continue to admire and support each other's work for many years to come. But while Charlotte's love life may have been rocky, her fame as one of the best actresses of her day only steadily climbed. She continued to perform as Romeo all across the United Kingdom to sold-out audiences. By the end of 1848, Charlotte had officially become a household name. In fact, she became so famous that she began to license out her image to the press. Because no American before her had garnered this much international acclaim, many began to celebrate Charlotte as the first true American celebrity. Ironically, Charlotte had never received this much attention in America itself. And so towards the end of 1848, after 2 full years abroad, she began to make plans for her return, with the hope that she would finally be recognized for her immense achievements in her home country. As author Tana Wojcik wrote, Charlotte already had a repertoire of successful characters with Lady Macbeth, Hamlet, and Romeo. She was recognized everywhere she went, and with railways and newspapers expanding far across the nation, her name and reputation traveled ahead of her. It was time for her talents to come home.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in.
There was one slight hiccup in Charlotte's plan to return to America. She had just fallen in love with an Englishwoman, Matilda Hayes. Hayes, who went by Max, was a socially progressive writer who dressed in men's suits, button-up shirts, and bow ties. Charlotte and Max originally met through the theater. When Charlotte's sister Susan left the stage to get married, Max briefly filled in as Juliet. Charlotte and Max immediately hit it off and began a secret affair. We can only imagine how exhilarating it must have been for Charlotte and Max to play lovers on stage while secretly falling in love in their private lives. Under the guise of their characters, Charlotte and Max swore their devotion to one another under the spotlight. And though Max ultimately left the stage, not interested in becoming an actress long-term, Charlotte and Max continued their relationship privately. Because Charlotte and Max were a same-sex couple, they had to be discreet about their relationship in public. But they certainly didn't go out of their way to hide the fact that they were a pair. They often went to parties together wearing identical outfits, dressed in matching men's waistcoats, hats, collared shirts, and cravats. As the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning once described, Miss Cushman, the American actress, was with her Miss Hayes. They dress alike. It is a female marriage. In a surviving photograph of Charlotte and Max taken in 1855, we see the couple posed in matching masculine outfits. Their hair is also fashioned in an identical style, with two small buns on each side of their face. Charlotte is seated in a chair, while Max stands beside her, with her hand affectionately placed on Charlotte's shoulder. It's remarkable to think that this photograph was taken in a time when queer relationships were strictly condemned. Both Charlotte and Max exhibited extraordinary bravery to so openly defy societal convention. Proudly posed together, here Charlotte and Max are unafraid to be their authentic selves, both as individuals and as a spunky pair. Charlotte and Max quickly became attached at the hip. So when Charlotte's return to America approached, she could not imagine leaving Max behind. She pleaded with Max to accompany her back to her home country. And though Max was hesitant to leave her life and career in England behind, she did eventually agree to join. And so, in August of 1849, Charlotte and Max set sail for America. Fortunately, Charlotte's homecoming was a massive success. With Max by her side, Charlotte went on to tour the entire country, performing in major cities such as New York, Boston, Chicago, and St. Louis. Every city she visited greeted Charlotte with roaring crowds, and her shows quickly sold out. In fact, Charlotte's tour was so successful that by its end she was hailed an American hero. As a result, Charlotte began to receive an unprecedented amount of public attention. Reporters began to follow her every move, and she could be found on the cover of every major publication across the country. And among her fan base were some of the most notable figures of American history, including Nathaniel Hawthorne, Walt Whitman, and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who even offered to write a play for Charlotte. Within just a few months, Charlotte had quickly become America's most cherished celebrity. So it comes with no surprise that artists began to clamor to capture America's greatest star across the mediums. Throughout the 1850s, Charlotte was painted on canvas, sculpted into marble, and sketched onto paper. In a standout portrait painted by William Page in 1853, we find Charlotte seated as she turns her head away from the viewer, She is dressed in her signature masculine style, with a large red bow tie, white collared shirt, and tailored suit. Here, Charlotte is unabashedly herself, openly defying the gender norms of her time and standing in her power. We find Charlotte again in a sculpted portrait made in the same year by Shakespeare Wood. Immortalized in white marble, here Charlotte emanates dignity and grace. She stares blankly ahead like a Greek deity, calm, measured, and confident. Both of these portraits can today be viewed at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery. But unfortunately, Charlotte's immense success did come at a price, and she began to feel worn down by the excessive attention. As she later described, "Sometimes it felt like 1,000 mouths were feeding on me." To cope, Charlotte surrounded herself with her own entourage of strong, forward-thinking women who shared her commitment to women's rights. It was around this time that Charlotte and Max befriended the female sculptor Harriet Hosmer and the first female reporter for the New York Times, Grace Greenwood. The four women quickly became inseparable, jokingly calling themselves the Jolly Bachelors. They began to have dreams of creating their own feminist haven, where they could live together and support their respective creative pursuits. And in 1852, that dream became a reality when the Jolly Bachelors decided to move to Rome together, where they established their own women-centered artistic community. Rome was quickly becoming a hub for artists, who took advantage of the city's inexpensive villas and lax social rules. With her accumulating wealth, Charlotte was able to afford a villa for herself and the Jolly Bachelors. At 33 years old, and already having achieved fame and fortune beyond her wildest dreams, Charlotte was ready for a slower pace. And so, shortly after their move, Charlotte decided to put her career on the stage on pause so that she could settle into her new life in Rome. And though she was no longer performing, Charlotte quickly busied herself with supporting the work of other female artists. It didn't take long for the Jolly Bachelors to grow in size, and for Charlotte to become the group's benefactor. Soon after setting up camp, Charlotte began to offer female artists a residency at their villa, where they could focus on developing their work and career. She also supported these artists financially and shared their work with her prominent connections, setting them up with patrons. One of these artists was the pioneering African and Native American sculptor Edmonia Lewis. Lewis, who was originally from New York, had an extraordinary natural talent for sculpture. But as a woman of color, she unfortunately came face to face with the brutality of racism prevalent in America. While studying at Oberlin College, she was even violently attacked by a mob after being falsely accused of poisoning some of her white classmates. After years of discrimination, Lewis eventually decided to move to Rome in 1865, where she could enjoy more social freedom. Soon after her arrival, Charlotte quickly took Lewis under her wing. She welcomed her into her community of female artists and provided a safe space for Lewis to develop her craft. Charlotte also helped promote Lewis's work, introducing her to collectors and advocating for her inclusion in museums. And Edmonia Lewis was one of many marginalized women that Charlotte offered her support to. Over the next few years, Charlotte's villa in Rome became a thriving center for female artists, where they could develop their careers in the company of like-minded, forward-thinking women. And these women not only supported each other artistically, but shared in a collective vision for a world in which women had more autonomy and power. They befriended women's rights activists such as Lucretia Mott and Jane Carlyle, supported the burgeoning suffrage movement, and fought for marital reforms. But unfortunately, one of the downsides of having so many passionate women under one roof was the prevalence of social drama. Because many of the women were queer, they often struck up romantic relationships with one another, at times eliciting competition and jealousy within the group. Things became particularly heated when Charlotte's partner Max began an affair with the sculptor Harriet Hosmer. Charlotte became enraged with jealousy when she saw Max growing closer to another woman. In a last-ditch effort to save their relationship, Charlotte planned a romantic getaway with Max to Paris in the winter of 1854, but Max soon after returned to Rome to be with Harriet. Charlotte was absolutely beside herself. As she wrote in a letter, "I can never suffer so much again." To ease her torment, Charlotte purchased 2 new companions, a terrier named Gip and a greyhound named Guy. She also decided to return to the stage, performing the role of Queen Catherine in Shakespeare's Henry VIII in London. When Charlotte eventually returned to Rome, she was able to make amends with Max, and the two went on to continue their relationship for the next 3 years. But by the spring of 1857, tensions between the two women once again began to boil over. Max started to feel increasingly resentful of Charlotte for having sacrificed her own career to support Charlotte in her itinerant lifestyle. And with a steady flow of women coming in and out of the villa, they both exhibited intense possessiveness and jealousy over one another. After one too many public outbursts, Charlotte and Max officially decided to split ways that summer, and Max left Rome for England. To make matters worse, while Charlotte was in the throes of grieving the end of their nearly decade-long relationship, Charlotte received a shocking letter stating that Max was suing her for $2,000 on the grounds that she had given up her writing career for Charlotte. Though Charlotte was deeply offended, she begrudgingly decided to pay Max the amount in full, wanting to avoid further tension. Charlotte would never see or hear from Max again.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in.
Fortunately for Charlotte, she would not remain alone for long. Just a few months after her split with Max, Charlotte was introduced to the American sculptor Emma Stebbins, who had recently moved to Rome to study the artwork of antiquity. Charlotte was immediately drawn to Emma's warm personality and independent nature. Charlotte and Emma also shared many commonalities. They were both the same age and both from Boston, and they bonded over their similar upbringing. It didn't take long for Charlotte and Emma to fall deeply in love with one another. Charlotte felt a deep sense of peace when she was around Emma, who she affectionately called her Juliet. By the summer of 1857, they moved into a new villa in Rome together and began settling into a blissful domestic partnership. As Emma later wrote, "From that time, the current of our two lives ran side by side." So when Charlotte planned an American tour in the fall of 1857, Emma quickly agreed to join her. After a few years off the stage, Charlotte was ready to get back into the spotlight. She was also in need of money, after spending much of her fortune supporting other female artists and her bohemian lifestyle in Rome. Unsurprisingly, America welcomed Charlotte back with open arms. She performed in nearly every major city across the country to roaring crowds and sold-out audiences. Now in her middle age, Charlotte had become an icon for many young women, who admired not only her unrivaled talent on the stage, but her advocacy for women's rights and liberation. In fact, it was on this tour that Charlotte became a hero to the young writer Louisa May Alcott, who would of course go on to write Little Women. It was also on this tour that Charlotte caught the attention of another young woman, Emma Crow. Crow was the 19-year-old daughter of Charlotte's financial advisor. After seeing Charlotte play Romeo in a performance in St. Louis, Crow became completely smitten with Charlotte. And because Emma Stebbins had remained in New York while Charlotte toured the Midwest, Charlotte didn't turn the attention away. Unable to resist the temptation, she and Crow quickly began an affair. And what may have started out as infatuation soon turned into a deeper romantic connection. When Charlotte returned to Rome that winter, she continued to stay in touch with Crow, sending her frequent love letters. Unfortunately, Charlotte was not very discreet about her affair with Crow, and when Emma Stebbins discovered that Charlotte was involved with another woman, she became furious. To make matters worse, Emma soon after discovered that Charlotte had invited Crow to stay with them in Rome. But Charlotte had the perfect cover-up. She had also invited her nephew Ned, who was around Crow's age. She then convinced Emma that she had only invited Crow to set her up with Ned. Crow, who came to Rome purely to see Charlotte, was taken aback when she was pawned off with Charlotte's nephew. In fact, she was so hurt by Charlotte's rejection that when Ned proposed to her a few weeks later, Crow impulsively agreed to marry him. But what Crow didn't realize at the time was that this was all part of Charlotte's secret plan. Crow marrying Ned would be the perfect beard for Charlotte and Crow to continue their affair. Though Crow and Ned went on to get married and have children, Charlotte and Crow continued to be romantically involved in secret for the rest of Charlotte's life. While Emma Stebbins was not pleased with Charlotte's antics, she did eventually decide to turn a blind eye to Charlotte's affair with Crow. Emma knew what she shared with Charlotte was real, and she was not intimidated by Charlotte's wandering eye. Charlotte, in return, still showered Emma with affection and saw her as her primary life partner. She also supported Emma's career as a sculptor, rallying behind her and connecting her with prominent patrons. In homage of their love, Emma sculpted a marble bust of Charlotte in 1870. In the portrait, we find Charlotte regally staring off into the distance. Now in her middle age, here Charlotte looks matured, with creases around her eyes and mouth. She has a dignified air about her and holds herself with a seasoned sophistication and wisdom. As a critic of the time wrote of this portrait, "The grander features of Miss Cushman's head are familiar to all who know the tragic artist. The womanly nature of the woman comes to us in this bust, translated by a woman's intimate tenderness." It was around this time that Emma was commissioned to design the statue for the famous Bethesda Fountain in Central Park, making her the first female artist to earn a public art commission in New York City. The sculpture was commissioned to commemorate the Croton Aqueduct, which was recently opened to bring clean water to the city after a cholera epidemic. At the very top of the sculpture is an angel holding a lily, a symbol of healing and health. Though this angel is not an explicit portrait of Charlotte, its striking similarities to Charlotte did not go unnoticed at the time. Like Charlotte, the angel has a forceful figure, with strong legs and broad shoulders. The connection between the angel and Charlotte is even more meaningful when considering that Charlotte was beginning to face some health issues at the time. Fatigued over performing and traveling, Charlotte often spent her days homebound and recovering. The angel holding the lily of health may have been Emma's way of hoping for Charlotte's swift convalescence. Whether Charlotte directly modeled for the statue or was Emma's secret source of inspiration, most scholars today believe that the angel was Emma's covert tribute to Charlotte, the woman who she loved and shared her life with. Though Charlotte's health was shaky, she did travel to America in the summer of 1861 for a tour. By the time Charlotte arrived, the Civil War had already broken out and was ravaging much of the country. A staunch supporter of the Union, Charlotte was invited to the White House to meet Abraham Lincoln while touring the Capitol. Lincoln was a great admirer of the theater, and had heard of Charlotte's prestige as an actress. As author Tana Wojcik described of their meeting, the president rose to greet her, lanky in his serious black suit. His personality was warm and welcoming. Standing beside the flag in front of his marble fireplace, tilting back in his black leather chair, Lincoln drawled his eager references to the theater, especially Shakespeare, to plays he had seen recently when he had slipped unannounced into a box. He had not seen Charlotte on stage, but he made her promise not to retire before he had seen her in Macbeth, his favorite play. How did Charlotte feel to meet the President of the United States? To know that he wanted to see her perform on stage? Was she filled with nerves, or was she able to keep her signature cool? When Charlotte returned to Rome later that year, she continued to closely follow the war, worried about her family and friends, and most of all, the future of her country. As she confided in a letter, "I'm so heartsick that I hardly know how to talk or write about it." Feeling helpless in Rome, Charlotte eventually decided to return to America to put on a benefit tour to raise money for the Union Army Sanitary Commission, which provided medical equipment to the Union's frontline doctors. While in the country, Charlotte grew even closer to President Lincoln, who frequently invited Charlotte over to dine with him at his house. Charlotte found the president warm and engaging, and they bonded over their shared love of the theater. And that October, Charlotte finally had the opportunity to perform for Lincoln, putting on Lincoln's favorite play, Macbeth, at the Grover's Theater in Washington, D.C. So, when 2 years later, on April 14, 1865, Charlotte heard the shocking news that President Lincoln was shot dead by John Wilkes Booth while attending a performance at the Ford's Theater, she was absolutely horrified. To make matters worse, Charlotte had performed with Booth before and knew him personally, although she had always written him off as an erratic drunk. Charlotte, who was back in Rome by this time, was overwhelmed with shock, sadness, and grief. As she wrote in an open letter to the American legation in Rome, "We have heard with mingled emotions of horror and regret, too deep for utterance, the appalling intelligence of the cruel and cowardly attack. In common with every true-hearted American, at home and abroad, we regard the loss of Abraham Lincoln as a national bereavement of unsurpassed magnitude." And as author Tana Wojcik remarked, Lincoln's death and the subsequent end of the war in April 1865 made Charlotte wish she were closer to home, to share her country's grief and recovery. But Charlotte would first need to endure her own recovery. It was around this time that Charlotte's health began to rapidly decline. She suffered from persistent exhaustion and began to develop a sharp pain in her chest. As she wrote to a friend, "I may perhaps be carrying my own death warrant." When her symptoms only worsened, Charlotte went to see a doctor, who diagnosed her with breast cancer in 1869. Because her cancer was particularly aggressive, her doctor suggested that Charlotte undergo a lumpectomy to remove the tumors in her breasts. For the procedure, Charlotte refused anesthesia, worried about its potentially lethal effects. We can only imagine how excruciatingly painful the procedure must have been without any sedation. To make matters worse, though doctors were at first optimistic, the tumors eventually grew back a few months after the surgery. Desperate to find a cure, Charlotte began investigating alternate treatments on her own, even writing to the Secretary of State about importing tree bark from Ecuador with potentially healing properties. With no viable cure in sight, Charlotte decided to move back to America full-time in 1872 in search of treatment. This meant saying goodbye to Rome, the city she called home for the last decade of her life. In those 10 years, Charlotte had helped countless female artists launch their careers through both emotional and financial support, and was able to create a safe haven for like-minded women. But with her increasingly bad health, Charlotte knew she would receive better care in her home country. Upon her return, Charlotte settled in Newport, Rhode Island, which had become a hotspot for intellectuals and artists, such as John Singer Sargent. She purchased a lavish new home, which she dubbed the Villa Cushman, large enough to accommodate not only her and Emma Stebbins, but also her nephew and his wife, Emma Crow, who Charlotte was secretly romantically involved with. Situated directly on the sea and with a large wraparound porch, the Villa Cushman was the perfect place for Charlotte to recuperate and rest. And when she was feeling up for it, Charlotte enjoyed hosting friends for intellectual gatherings. It was here in Newport that Charlotte spent the next 2 years, often remarking that she felt happier than she had in a long time. But unfortunately, Charlotte's health once again took a turn for the worse. She began to feel another hard mass growing in her breast, and she was often overcome with fatigue and chills. In fact, her symptoms became so severe that Charlotte began to worry that she might not have much time left. But never one to crumble in the face of adversity, Charlotte was determined to return to the stage. Though she was too physically unwell to stand for a full performance, Charlotte began to organize dramatic readings where she could recite monologues to audiences while seated. As Charlotte wrote in a letter, "I won't give up reading, ever, while life lasts." And though her body may have been weak, Charlotte never lost her ability to capture an audience's attention, her voice bellowing to every corner of the room with tremendous power. As author Tana Wojcik described, far from being a pale imitation of the play, Charlotte's voice did as much to fill a theater as a whole troupe of actors. Now in her 60s, Charlotte was helpless to stop the illness that was crawling its way into her, but she could, if only for an hour, wake Shakespeare from the dead. But by 1874, it was clear that Charlotte was becoming too sick to perform in public. So that November, she decided to give a final farewell performance at the Boots Theater in New York. In the audience were the city's most prestigious persons, all there to celebrate Charlotte's immense, nearly 40-year-long career. How did Charlotte feel as she walked onto the stage for the last time? Was she proud of all she was able to accomplish as one of the greatest actresses of her age? Or was she filled with grief and sadness that her time on the stage was coming to an end? As author Tana Wojcik eloquently described, standing on the apron of the stage, Charlotte could see thousands of fans crowding excitingly into every available space in the theater. They stood along the aisles at the back, and in the galleries they leaned precariously over the railings. At the signal from the orchestra, the audience turned their faces up to be beautified. Tonight, Boots Theater was a place of worship. That night, Charlotte bookended her career by performing the same role she had made her debut in 40 years earlier, Lady Macbeth. As she greeted the audience, her large, deep-set gray eyes lit up with pleasure. After her performance, Charlotte delivered a heartfelt speech to the audience. As she declared to her fans, "As I look back upon my life, it seems that it would have been impossible for me to have led any other. I was, by a press of circumstances, thrown at an early age into a profession for which I had received no special education or training. I had already, though so young, been brought face to face with necessity. To be thoroughly in earnest, intensely in earnest in all my thoughts and in all my actions, whether in my profession or out of it, became one single idea. Art is an absolute mistress. She will not be coquetted with or slighted. She requires the most entire self-devotion, and she repays with grand triumphs." When Charlotte left the theater for her hotel room, her fans pooled onto the streets to follow her. In fact, she later estimated a crowd of over 25,000 people came to say their farewell. As Charlotte wrote, "The whole big square in front of the Fifth Avenue Hotel was crammed with human beings. They could not move. They were so densely packed. It was a send-off fit for royalty, and Charlotte felt like an American queen. As Charlotte looked out at her thousands of admirers, she swelled with pride. If she was forced to leave the stage, then at least she could confidently say she'd be leaving with a bang.
We'll continue our story after a brief word from our advertisers.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, listeners. Now let's dive back in.
Unfortunately, by 1876, Charlotte's health had severely deteriorated. Needing more intensive medical treatment, she moved back to her hometown of Boston, the city where she had spent her childhood in. One day, while on a walk along the Charles River, Charlotte caught a chill. By the next day, she developed a high fever, which shortly after progressed into pneumonia. Charlotte began to slip in and out of consciousness, her whole body trembling with what doctors called rigor. Emma Stebbins remained by her side, bringing Charlotte warm drinks and medicine. But though she initially seemed to recover, it was soon clear that Charlotte's end was near. How did Charlotte feel as she took her last labored breaths? Did she look back at her life fondly? Was she proud of all her accomplishments? Or did she feel that she still had so much more life to live? Was she filled with sorrow to have her life unfairly cut short? Charlotte Cushman passed away on February 18, 1876, surrounded by her loved ones. She was only 59 years old. Her funeral was held a few days later at the King's Chapel in Boston, where hundreds of her friends, family, and admirers congregated to pay their respects to the greatest actress of their generation. In fact, there were so many people wanting to commemorate Charlotte that mourners spilled out from the chapel and onto the street, creating a crowd that stretched past the Boston Common. As author Tana Wojcik eloquently wrote, Charlotte's death cast the whole nation into mourning. Thousands of people came to Boston from across the country for the funeral, waiting in line for hours just to get a glimpse of the coffin. Reporters from around the world were in attendance. The coffin was carried out and placed in a carriage that slowly led a long and winding procession. It was a scene to rival the finest Greek drama. And the public spectacle of Charlotte's Boston funeral was only the beginning of the national mourning that followed her death. In New York, nearly 10,000 people gathered in the streets for a candlelight vigil. It would have been difficult to find a newspaper that did not carry her obituary. Charlotte was compared to the best actors of her age, and more than once to Beethoven. She was even compared to Napoleon. Charlotte was buried shortly afterwards in the Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She continued to receive eulogies and tributes across the world in the weeks following her death. Today, Charlotte's legacy lives on in a few forms. After Charlotte's death, her longtime partner Emma Stebbins published a biography on Charlotte in 1878 titled Charlotte Cushman, Her Letters and Memories of Her Life. Geraldine Jewsbury based a character off of Charlotte in her 1848 novel, The Half-Sisters. In 1907, Lydia Elliott Morris created the Charlotte Cushman Club to create safe housing and accommodations for actresses, which today has grown into the Charlotte Cushman Foundation. Charlotte's home in Boston is now a site on the Boston Women's Heritage Trail. The Boston Public Library has a room dedicated to Charlotte Cushman, and the Brooklyn Museum has a portrait plaque honoring Charlotte Cushman in their study center. But as Charlotte wrote in her late life, "What is or can be the record of an actress, however famous? Other artists, poets, painters, sculptors, musicians, all produce something that lives after them. But for the actress, her mark is of the moment and ephemeral." Though she was celebrated as the greatest American actress of her time, Charlotte Cushman has since faded into obscurity, and her name has been unfairly written out of history. Unfortunately, her erasure was largely due to both homophobia and misogyny present in the Victorian age that followed Charlotte's death. As author Tana Wojcik explained, "But even as Charlotte was being eulogized, she was being forgotten." The late 19th century had been a decade of steady progress for women, but these advances had created a backlash among socially conservative critics in America and Victorian England. To these critics, Charlotte's life was only useful as a mortality tale, edited to show the most convenient and teachable moments. Many Victorian writers expressed surprise that she had been so successful, despite her manly appearance. But the people who had seen her perform never forgot, and wrote their own memoirs about the night they saw Charlotte Cushman as Romeo, Lady Macbeth, Queen Catherine, or Hamlet. Then, for a time, she disappeared. So in today's episode, we aim to honor Charlotte as the incredible actress she was, who dazzled audiences across the Western world with her impeccable performances, mastered both male and female parts, and played such a convincing Romeo that women frequently fell in love with her. As a brazen and forward-thinking woman who managed her own career, advocating for herself to ensure that she was paid the same rate as her male counterparts. As a passionate lover who openly engaged in same-sex relationships in a time when they were harshly condemned. As a fierce feminist who supported women's rights and female artists. And as a lion-hearted woman who faced adversity head-on and dared to live her life with authenticity and fervor. In the words of author Tana Wojcik, Charlotte Cushman was a woman who would insist she was destined for greatness at a time when women did not have careers or own property, were legally enslaved to their husbands if they were married, financially imperiled if they were not, had no public institutions dedicated to their art, scholarship, or health, and could not even go to the theater alone or linger alone in a public place. At a time when actresses were thought of as little more than prostitutes, one actress would triumph in the most unlikely way. Of course, Charlotte was first and foremost an extraordinary performer, who today still has one of the most impressive acting careers of all of modern history. She never turned down a challenge and conquered some of the most difficult theatrical roles ever written. She mastered both female and male parts, playing queens and prostitutes with as much gusto as princes and lover boys. In fact, many remarked that she played a more convincing man on stage than her male counterparts. As author Tana Wojcik wrote, "On stage, Charlotte merged seamlessly with her characters, and in memory she fused with them entirely, making them new beings. She even usurped the authors of the plays themselves." And Charlotte not only challenged gender norms on the stage, but behind the scenes as well. She managed her own career and brokered her own deals, and in doing so, opened new avenues of opportunity for women in the theater world. As author Tana Wojcik continued, "From girlhood, she was taught the theater was sinful, yet Charlotte Cushman became an actress and then America's first celebrity. For much of Charlotte's career, theater audiences were mainly men, and women were not allowed to attend the theater alone. Yet she inspired passionate responses in both men and women. To men, she embodied the man they wanted to be, gallant, passionate, an excellent sword fighter. To women, she was a romantic, daring figure, their Romeo. And Charlotte played Romeo to many women off the stage as well. Charlotte enjoyed several long-term same-sex relationships, as well as flings, throughout her lifetime, unafraid to love openly and passionately, despite the prejudices of her time. It undoubtedly took Charlotte an immense amount of courage to love so defiantly, especially considering that she was the most famous American woman of her time. As author Arthur Bloom declared, Cushman could not have helped but be aware of the danger that disclosure of her personal life might bring her. She navigated these treacherous waters by hiding in plain sight. Aware of her masculine proclivities, she flaunted them by specializing in male characters throughout her life: Romeo, Hamlet, and Cardinal Wolsey in Henry VIII. Cushman found a way to enjoy her lesbianism in her private life, while simultaneously maintaining the virtuous public persona her professional reputation demanded. This was not easy. She was not only lesbian, but far from monogamous. At various times and sometimes simultaneously, she conducted love affairs. Charlotte was also a fierce supporter of women's rights, helping pave the way for early feminism. In Rome, she took time off the stage to support other female artists, and created a safe space for women to congregate and share radical ideas. And Charlotte not only dreamed of a better world for women, but lived her life according to those progressive values. As author Arthur Bloom continued, Charlotte was born into a world in which men went out to pursue money and influence, while women stayed home, cooked, and produced babies. Had Charlotte married, any money she earned, property she bought, or investments she made would have automatically belonged to her husband. Yet Charlotte was able, as an unmarried woman, to negotiate 19th century expectations of marriage and motherhood, as a lesbian to negotiate the ignorance of heterosexual society, as an actress to negotiate successfully, both in America and Europe, with the men who managed the theaters in which she played. It enabled her to rise above the prejudices of the period, prejudices that remained long after she was dead. But more than anything else, Charlotte was a bold and brazen woman who never stopped believing in herself, even in the face of great adversity. She lived a large and daring life and was never afraid to be her raw and authentic self. She loved fiercely and freely, dreamed as big as the stars, and had as much swagger as the sword-strapped characters she played on stage. We end today's episode with a gorgeous quote from the author Tana Wojcik. Charlotte Cushman's life was held up as a model for women across the world. Her success had been snatched from the fate that had brought women so little, something silencing to the vast defamatory tongue that declares women of so small purpose. Charlotte's career had proven them all wrong. Since she was a girl, she had been confident of her larger purpose, and when she failed, she drove herself forward anyway, creating a life of daring adventure. I hope you have enjoyed part 2 of ArtMuse's 2-part episode on Charlotte Cushman. I have included images, resources, and suggestions for further reading on the ArtMuse website and Instagram. ArtMuse is produced by Kula Production Company. Today's episode was written by me, your host, Grace Anna. Stay tuned as I continue to share the stories of the women behind some of the world's most important works of art. Until next time, bye for now.
There are a lot of podcasts out there.
But there aren't a lot of podcasts that talk to chicken influencers.
There's a chicken for every occasion, actually.
Or that write catchy songs about particle physics.
It may seem like a hoax, but it's only quantum chromodynamics, folks.
In fact, there's only one show that does all of that, and it's our show, Part-Time Genius.
So if you love discovering new things in delightfully surprising ways, join us, Will and Mango, every week on Part-Time Genius, available wherever you get your podcasts.